Hey guys, it's Ethan from Zimmer Labs, and this is a Titan Class Graflex that I just finished up for Robert. This was a Korbanth pre-built, pre-installed neopixel Profi board saber that he bought maybe a year back, maybe not quite. It is built with an 89 Sabres hilt. And he said basically it was nice, but it had some problems, you know, not necessarily right off the bat, but, you know, over time developed some problems with parts and with, you know, functioning, and things weren't working right. So he sent it in to me, and he wanted me to give him a few options of A, just fixing what was there, B, upgrading certain things, C, doing kind of a full rebuild. So we discussed all that and opted for a full rebuild, and I'll take you through it. The hilt itself is a Graflex replica, so it works like you would expect a vintage Graflex replica to work, in that it has, you know, your 3 standard sections that clip together and clamp shut. Has a pretty decent finish all in all. It's a nice brushed aluminum looking finish. It's brass with tin or nickel or something like that anodized over it, just like the original Graflexes were. The only thing I don't personally love about the 89 Sabres Graflex is I think probably the main thing is the clamp card. The finish on the clamp card, just as you can see, or hopefully you can see, doesn't really match the rest of the finish on the hilt. This has got a lot more brush strokes to it. This almost looks like it's painted silver, but it's just the finish on the metal, and it's a very minor quibble. Otherwise, you know, in general, it's a well done hilt. It's a good replica. I personally like the Roman props replica a little bit more, but all in all, it's a good replica. So this is what we ended up doing, and as I said, it's a Titan Class. So for those of you who have seen my Titan Class video, this is not going to be anything that's going to be super new, but for Robert, let's start with the chassis itself. It's a Goth 3 Designs chassis with additional chassis parts. This center part here is an extension piece intended to be used for a crystal focus color extender board, but I combine it with the 26650 chassis in order to create the Titan Class chassis, which is unique in that it is the only chassis out there that'll hold this big, monstrous 6800 milliamp hour 26800 battery. And it's nice because, as you can see, it's removable, so you don't have to rely on in-hilt recharges. You could take the battery out to recharge it. You could take the battery out to replace it if you are on the fly and you don't have time to recharge. Profi board here, version 2.2, 2 point whatever. SD card and USB access is right here. The next major upgrade on this guy is the 36mm speaker that we use on the end, and this guy makes all the difference in the world. Kind of hard to show off just how big the speaker is, but let me grab there's a 28mm speaker. This is a nice speaker. This is one of the JBLs that I usually use in standard non-custom builds, and this is a speaker that sounds really good. Now, side by side, hopefully you guys can get some sense of the difference here. And just the center cone of the 36mm speaker is the same size as the entire 28mm speaker. So when you add on the foam surround, this guy it's about twice as big of a speaker, really. And what that does is it maximizes the 3 watt amp that's on this board is powerful enough to drive this speaker quite well, but this speaker really isn't maximizing the amplifier. This speaker right here is, and you get a lot more SPL, you get a lot more really high signal quality audio coming out of this. You get lower frequencies, you get just more power behind it, more oomph. This saber can be heard above a crowd, and you know, if you put it side by side with a saber that has this speaker in it, this guy with the 36mm would literally drown this guy out. You would barely hear this one over this one, and that's a huge deal, because part of what makes a really good custom lightsaber a good custom lightsaber is the sound, the accuracy of the sound, you know, the motion accuracy. But all in all, the more you can really hear it, the more you notice how accurate it is, the more the sound plays with the lighting effects going on, the better the whole experience is and the more realistic it is. So anytime you can upgrade the overall sound quality, it's something you want to do. It's a no-brainer, because it really just makes the whole experience that much better. So this is the first of two or three main upgrades. The initial, I should have saved the original chassis that was in this guy, but those of you guys who have bought one of the pre-installed Korbanth neopixel sabers, you guys know it was very, very, very basic, very simple chassis that was just a solid piece. It was like a bright, hot, orangey gold color, really, really poor quality plastic printed chassis, and then it had the 89 Sabers blade holder attached to it. So, you know, it was probably about this long. And not that there's anything wrong with the 89 Sabers blade holder. That's the next upgrade that we made here, is opting for the Solos Hold 7/8 inch blade holder, which this guy is just heads and tails better in its design, in that the way it's set up allows you to have the entire chassis fully removable, fully modular, so you can just pull the whole thing out. And the reason it's different is because of the way that the top portion of the blade holder, which remains in the hilt, versus the bottom portion, the way that that's set up and where the cut is made. You know, all the screws and everything that hold this portion in are unattached to this portion, whereas the 89 Sabers version of the blade holder has little screws up top facing down that you have to remove those two in order to slide this out. And in order to remove those two, you have to remove the rabbit ears. And then in addition, you also have to pull the auxiliary switch out and pull a pin that holds the auxiliary switch in place, and then you have to take that out in order to slide the chassis and the whole thing out of the hilt. And you have to remove the brass pins that are here in the cutout windows of the Graflex. So, you know, the whole process of removing the chassis, if you're using the 89 Sabers blade holder, it's gonna take you 10 to 20 minutes to accomplish, whereas this guy takes you literally, what was that, 4 seconds? 4 seconds to accomplish. The only thing that holds this guy in place is the overall fit. As you can see, it's not going to fall off. And then the glass eye. The glass eye screws in through the hilt here. Have to be careful to get the threads lined up right. You don't want to cross thread it. So that screws in through the hilt and it locks the blade holder into place because the blade holder has a cutout right there behind the hole, and this is long enough or tall enough that it goes in and it kind of reaches in and grabs the blade holder. So that holds it in place, and that's all you need to hold it in place. It's perfectly strong to do it, but that's just such a simple process, you know. You just unscrew that one piece, slide it out, you're done. And for me, when I'm playing with a saber, or if I'm working on a saber, if I'm showing off a saber, if I'm replacing the battery on it, I want to be able to take it apart like that. I don't want to have special tools handy. I certainly don't want to have to do a bunch of things and have a bunch of small parts that I have to set aside and worry about not misplacing, because if I'm outside or I'm at a convention, or if I'm at the movies, I'm not going to bring screwdrivers with me. I'm just not going to, and I don't want to lose pieces, and I don't want to worry about, you know, banging up and ruining this rivet right here when I try to take the rabbit ears out, so I have to go get a new one, you know, and I don't want to scratch anything up. I just want the whole thing to be simple and easy. So that's the main reason why this Solos Hold blade holder is so great, just overall, but especially in comparison to other older design blade holders that don't take all that stuff into account. So this is the next major upgrade that we did. Inside here, next major upgrade is the blade connector system. This is a stock Custom Works neopixel pogo pin neopixel on board blade connector that I made a custom aluminum housing for, and a nice custom diffused plexiglass screen to diffuse the light from the neopixels. So that's just inset right in there, about 2 inches deep, and that's a huge upgrade over what was in there before, which was a 7-pin very basic neopixel connector that didn't have any onboard pixels. It only had 7 pins, and 3 of the 7 were frozen or jammed, so that it just wasn't working anymore. This guy's got, so it's either 11 or 12 pogo pins, so there's a lot more pins on this guy, which is much better for transferring the current. It's much better because if one gets jammed, you still have 10 or 11 that are working, whereas if you only have 7, one gets jammed, you only have 6 that's working, and that may not be enough to actually make your blade ignite. So extra pogo pins means extra redundancy, means extra resiliency, means your blade's going to light up a lot more. It's a lot more likely that it will, even if something breaks. If you have this connector, it's going to last a lot longer than a connector with less pins in it. Let's fire it up real quick. Just a simple on-off main power switch there. Small 1.3, I think it's a 1.3 millimeter recharge port right here. You can just plug in here and connect up to a single cell lithium battery charger in order to charge this battery, or you can loosen these retention screws, separate the chassis into sections, and put this guy into a battery charger. However you want to do it, whatever is easiest, and it's as simple as that to do. There's really nothing to it. Just make sure you put them back together, tighten it up nice and tight, and when you do push them back together, you just want to make sure that you don't jam the connector pins that connect the top and bottom sections. You know, you don't want to misalign them and jam them and bend everything up, but basically you'd have to try, I would say, you'd have to try to do that, or maybe be a little bit drunk when you're doing it, because these guys are on rails, so they already are pretty much aligned. So as long as you just kind of push it together and you don't jam it in really fast and not pay attention, you're not going to have an issue there, because like I said, they're on rails. So you've got 2 steel rails acting as guides, so you're pretty much aligned all the time. You do that, power it on. You've got power up here. Auxiliary right here. Love how that lights up. And that's just super bright and really everything you hope for from your, your blade connector. And it's definitely more than enough brightness for a blade plug to be slid in here to cover that up, but still shine right through. Hopefully you guys can get some sense of how loud this guy really truly is. Just really crisp, clean. Really deep, throaty. Really excellent, really good sound, and that's nice when you are talking about a Graflex, because one of the very few downsides to the overall setup of a Graflex is that it doesn't really lend itself to excellent sound, and the reason for that is the design, because 9 times out of 10 your speaker's on the end, right? So when you put the hilt back together and close it up, your speaker is right down here jammed up against the bottom, and this is a solid metal bottom, so you have to start drilling holes, and you'd be much better off if this was just mesh or something and the sound could really come out. But there also isn't any resonance chamber here, because that speaker is right up to the bottom of the pommel. So if there was a bit more air space inside the hilt for the speaker to resonate, it would sound a lot better, a lot louder, a lot deeper. So for a lot of Graflexes that you come across, quite often they don't have the best sound. Like, a lot of times they'll sound a little bit on the wimpy side, and that kind of stinks because it's such a ubiquitous lightsaber. I mean, if you think lightsaber, this is what you think. And this is the #1, probably the most built, the most bought, the most sold, the most options, the most chassis, the most designs. This guy, it's been in the most movies. This is the most common lightsaber, period, bar none, hands down. So you would hope for the most common, the most revered, the most frequently bought, the most often built, it would have good sound. So anytime I can come up with a way to make the Graflex sound better, I always try to do that. It's just, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's one of the few downsides of this hilt, of this lightsaber, that's still, after all this time, 40 years, 40-something years, it's still kind of, one of the weaknesses of it. But with this speaker, hopefully you guys can really get a sense of how loud that is. And I'm not talking less quietly right now. This thing is basically drowning me out. Super duper loud, really just powerful sound. Love that. Great, excellent solution. This guy also, as you can see, has a ton of holes in the bottom. That's not something I did. That's something that was part of the pre-installation that came with the lightsaber when Robert bought it from Korbanth. Personally, I don't love just the holes everywhere. When I do holes on the Graflex, I will obviously put them underneath the Kobold clip. But then if I want to do more than that, typically you can either drill out these rivets here so that the hole goes straight through. That will add a lot of sound. Or you can drill micro holes right around the very lip that goes around the edge here. And if you use a small enough drill bit, they're almost invisible. But if you use a small enough drill bit and you put enough of them in all the way around, you could do 50 holes. You won't see it, but you'll get a ton of sound venting coming out there. So that's how I would have done it for something I did, but this was already done, so I'm not gonna worry too much about it. Because again, it's not something you really notice unless you're looking for it. Let's slap the blade in here real quick. So the blade itself is held in by the glass eye, which is all. It's essentially the only retention for the entire lightsaber. But the glass eye holds the blade holder, which holds the chassis in, which also presses on the blade and holds the blade in place. You can, to the extent that you feel the need to have something else securing the blade, you can either add some length to the flathead screw that's right here. That's an option. Or you can replace this flathead screw entirely with a hex screw, you know, an Allen wrench screw. You can just basically drill this out and tap and set this hole for whatever size hex screw you want, and then you can just have the screw go all the way in and put some pressure on the blade. But for this guy, as far as I'm concerned, this is sufficient because, as you can see, that's got some grab to it. And that's accomplished by just rough sanding the very bottom of the blade here. This Solos Hold blade holder, one of the actual few drawbacks to it is that it is pretty notorious for being a tight fit for blades. And I think that happens because they powder coated, you know, they powder coated it black, and they powder coated the inside of the blade holder, which they probably meant to do but didn't realize, with the tolerances being as they are, that if you put too much powder in there and you put too thick of a coat of powder coating on it, then you're not going to be able to get the blade to fit in there. So personally had plenty of times when I had to, you know, sand out the inside of the blade holder just to get a blade to go in there at all, or sand down the blade. But the positive side, the flip side of that, is that you do get a much tighter, you know, much more secure blade when it does go in there. So this guy fits nice and snug, and that makes for a nice tight fit and a more secure lightsaber blade. You don't have to worry too much about, and you don't have to worry about putting in extra retention screws. So that's your first blade, which is just a bright blue. Second blade, this is a really cool or cold white color bordering on blue. And I think I set up the ignition on this one to be a bit slower too. Nope, I made that up. I'm actually going to go back and change that before I call this finished. I want to have this be a slower ignition blade, just because it feels like most of them these days all seem to be so fast. This is a unstable white and blue audio flicker blade. Electricity blade. And as you guys hopefully can hear, really good sound on this guy. So blue turbine blade. Blue fire blade. Purple blade. Nice bright green. really good sound on this guy. This is a yellow-white audio flicker blade. And I actually double tapped that. So let's jump back one. There's bright red blade. And a fire blade. The blade lock up on these fire blades is crazy bright. Nice drag tip too. And I think the blue color cycle, aka Tron blade. And then back to the beginning. And that's about it. I'm not sure what else to show you guys. Really good shine through on the glass eye. Nice illumination all around through all the cutouts. Let's just pull the blade out right quick just by loosening the screw a tiny bit. And then of course always remember to turn off the main power when you're done using it. Pull the chassis one last time for good measure, and let's split the chassis into its component sections real quick just so you guys can get a look at that. And this is the only part where you have to worry about these screws, so if you are taking it apart into its halves, you want to be careful. So you have to take these screws all the way off. So you want to be careful not lose them. They are 440 SAE screws, so if you do lose them, you can replace them pretty easily. But that's how this guy is set up. It's the bottom half, your main connectors. Power and ground are all tripled up, with the switches and the data lines being singles, so that you have plenty of contact and connector for current. And then there is a nice spring mount, or chassis mounted springing connector for the positive end on the battery here. And then there is actually a little cover which you can remove. It's just hanging out mounted to these two steel rails, and there is again another connector going on right there if you want to disconnect the blade connector and just slide that whole chassis section apparatus out. You can do that too, but what's cool is that you have this section here to add stuff. So if you want to add Bluetooth, or if you want to add an OLED display panel, or if you want to add a crystal chamber, you can do that. You've got an 1.5 inches of height to work with here, and at least half of the depth of the lightsaber to work with there. It's basically nothing inside there. So it's a nice little section. You can keep a snack in there, a couple of peanuts or something. It's a nice little section of extra real estate in case you have something you want to add down the road. Not a big deal, but technology changes, so maybe something will come out that you want to add on that you didn't have first time around. You need a little extra room, maybe you can add it on. Now to put this guy back together, you just put the two halves together and reattach these bolts like so. This can be a little tricky, especially if you have sausage fingers, which I don't. But basically, once you get them centered, it's just a matter of applying a little pressure and spinning them down. And that's that. Make sure everything is nice and tight. And turn it on like that, like so, and you're good. Monster speaker. Love this thing. Thanks for watching, guys. And Robert, let me know what you think. If you have any questions, concerns, any changes you want to make before I pack this guy up and send it off. But it is otherwise just about all set. I want to make that one change to the code, to the programming of the config file. But other than that, she's all set. Oh, and there's one other thing to show you guys. One nice little thing that I like to do when doing a Graflex that has a good blade holder. The Solos Hold blade holder is nice for another reason, because it gives you the opportunity to get these little tiny holes correct and accurate. Because on a vintage Graflex, there's a little connector bit right here, and another one right here inside these holes. They shouldn't just be black. If you want to get them just right, screen accurate, you want to get these little extra tidbits installed in there. So this guy, if you see from the side, that's a metal contact right there, which would have been used to plug something into the Graflex flash. And then the same on this side. It's a different kind of contact, but it's another silver contact in there. So this blade holder allows you to get those little details right and gives you that much more accuracy, which is great. You know, it's something you want to do. And then the other thing I did was, if you look inside here in the rabbit ear section, I did sand down the dents that stick up on either side of the rabbit ears. Sand those down, then the blade will fit in much better, and these won't be, you know, squeezed open all the time. They actually can close naturally and correctly around the blade. Hopefully you guys can see that. Nice snug fit. It's not sticking out because of the dents or the lumps, whatever they're called. And you know, just so you guys know why they existed, originally when this was a camera flash, this was a collar for a light bulb to be screwed into, and there was a big round reflective disc here, and then, you know, you'd push a button on the back, or, you know, via a suction tube connecting into this button, and it would have pressed and it would have flashed the light bulb and reflected and shown, you know, for, you know, say cheese moment for a picture. And so right here and here, right here, there's two, like, you know, bumps that come out in towards the middle. And the whole point of those being there was so that when you screw the light bulb in, those are the things that caught the light bulb's threads going around that let it screw in and held the light bulb in. So there's no functional reason for those to be there anymore now that this is a lightsaber and not an actual camera flash. They serve zero purpose whatsoever as far as a lightsaber is concerned. They're only useful if you want to screw a light bulb into this guy, which I don't think Robert's going to want to do. I can't imagine he would. So that's, you know, that's why they exist, that's why you can get rid of them, and that's why you should get rid of them. And yeah, I guess that's it. You guys are probably sick of hearing me talk. So thank you guys, as always, for watching. Next video is going to be almost identical, so if you watch this one, you guys can skip the next one if you want. But, you know, it's one of those things where I had to make two in a row, so it is what it is. Then after that, we are going to do a video of this guy. And I know it doesn't look a lot different, but believe me when I say it is. This is a legit, beautiful shape, genuine vintage, 50 or 60 year old, Fulmer Graflex, non-replica, really, really excellent mint condition, with a gorgeous metal master with spinning plasma gate inside and every possible bell and whistle you can think of installed into it, done in the A New Hope setup with the, you know, nice accurate grips here and a nice accurate double riveted belt clip. So this guy will be the 2 videos from now, give or take. Maybe 3. I have a Darth Maul that I have to do a video for, but yeah, stay tuned for this guy because it's going to be really cool. And as always, thank you guys for watching.